We have an interesting presenter tonight. She's been a participant in past meetings, but she has an interesting story to tell, and we're going to let Daniel Endy be the person she interacts with this evening. After her presentation is over, after their conversation, we'll have a chance to pose questions. And once again, you can either pose questions in the chat down at the bottom of your screen. You can raise your hand in the participant screen. I'd be happy to call on you. You can personally pose your questions, or I can read them from the chat. So, looking forward to hearing what Kathy has to say this evening. Daniel and Kathy, you want to take it from here?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
Yep.
Thank you, Jim. Welcome, everybody, and a special welcome to Kathy McDaniel, sometimes also known as MK, who just came back from a trip to Alaska and saw some wonderful things up there, but we might touch on that later, depending. But the main topic here is Kathy's experience and her wonderful book. Kathy, do you want to say a few words about your book as an introduction?
Oh, as an introduction, I guess what I'd like to say is that it took me about 21 years to write it. I had the experience 21 years ago, and it was something that I didn't know anything about NDEs at the time. And I thought, well, it was a bad dream, or I wasn't sure what it was, but I thought if I would maybe write it out, I could get it out of my head. And it didn't work that way. So the book got longer and longer. And finally, I ran into somebody that pointed me towards ions, and that made all the difference. I was able to find out from other people that dark near-death experiences or distressing, what they call them now, do occur, and I landed right in the middle of one. So I was at a conference about a year and a half ago, IONS, on the East Coast, where you guys are, and a lady asked me if, actually she told me, she said, "You have to write a book, don't you?" And I said, yeah, and she was a medium, all right, so I didn't know that, and she was a publisher. So I was her first client, and I took quite a while to sit down and really put it all in book form and story form, and it was published last June.
So let me take this opportunity, in case any of our viewers are not familiar with IANs and NDEs. NDE stands for near-death experience, popularized initially by Dr. Raymond Moody, coined the term in the 70s when he published his book, Life After Life. And IANS stands for the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which I am a member of, as is Jim and Kathy. I believe you're also a member. And IANS has an annual conference, which is wonderful, where near-death experiencers get to meet together in person and to share their experiences. Now, Kathy, one of the things you said is actually fairly common to near-death experiencers, although many people may not be aware of it, is that when they come back, they're often not sure if what they experienced was real, even though many also report that it was realer, it was a more real experience than this world here, than this life. Did you have that experience where your experience felt more real than normal life?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I went to hell, which is not a good place to be. So while I was there,
I wanted to establish the idea that it feels more real than this world. So,
oh yeah, I didn't feel dead. I did not know I was dead. I thought I was alive, and I was just in some very strange situation. And I felt like I was running for my life down there trying to survive in this really odd situation. So yeah, it was pretty horrible. And then when I got back, I was haunted by it. I was afraid it was going to happen again. I had trouble sleeping, and people were saying, no, it was just the drugs. And I said, well, wait a minute. Didn't you give me something called white amnesia? And you told me I would not remember anything that happened. They put me into a coma for 3 weeks because I was dying of ARDS and I couldn't breathe. And so I said, how come I can still remember all of that? Well, they just shrugged their shoulders. And yeah, it's very weird, especially when you don't have anybody else to talk to about it.
Yeah, so for those who are listening, it's often the case that when folks have a near-death experience, so let me backtrack a little bit. Near-death experiences, books about them have been in the news, so to speak, have been in the popular culture for quite a while, to the degree that people think that they're sort of normal and you have a near-death experience and you come back and you're like all enlightened and you're ready to go. But that is not the case. What tends to happen is that folks come back and they're very much off kilter. They're very confused as to what happened and why and what does this mean, because it's such a major shift in your perspective. So, Kathy, your experience, most folks, 80% or so of near-death experiencers, at least those who speak about it, have what are generally considered positive experiences. And somewhere around 15-20% have what are generally considered distressing or negative experiences, which is what you had, right? So tell us a little bit about the lead up to this and how you found yourself ill and then your death experience.
I had been caring for a very good friend, former fiance. He had leukemia. And so I came up to help him in Seattle from California. And it was only going to be a 3 to 5 month trek, but it turned into about 8 months. And it was horrific. He was sick. He was getting better. He was getting worse. It was a very 24-hour, it just went on. And I got so run down that when a flu came around, I caught it, and it went into pneumonia, and then it went into ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome. And then they gave me a 38% chance of making it. The only thing they could do to keep me alive, though, is like the COVID people, is they put a trach in you or whatever and stick you in a coma, self-induced coma. And I was there and told it would just be black. I would just go to sleep. I wouldn't even know. I just relax. But what happened is I somehow became conscious, and I was in this completely dark place. And I thought, I didn't know what, I thought maybe I was in a closet, or the lights had gone out in the hospital or something had happened. So I was afraid to move because I didn't know if I was laying down or sitting or standing. And all of a sudden it started getting brighter, but it was a reddish glow, and there was like fog, and I could hear people screaming. And then there were shrieks, and then it started getting warm, and it was all scary. And I thought, oh, wow, this can't be good. And all of a sudden, this horrible voice boomed out at me, do you know where you are? And I thought for a second, oh, I hope I'm wrong. I just said, hell. And this demon, I determined later, just burst out with this horrible maniacal laugh. Well, it scared me to death. So I just turned and ran into the darkness. And what happened after that was really like a bad movie. I kept finding myself in like movie sets. The first one was a destroyed city. It seemed like New York City, all the buildings were toppled and there was fires everywhere and destruction. And I couldn't, I didn't, I was just there. So I ran for cover in one of these fallen over concrete structures and started looking into the darkness to try and find other people. And I saw one other person. I thought it was a person, but in the meantime, these other creatures were kind of skittering around. They looked like big spiders. And I just asked him, I said, geez, hello, maybe we could get together, and the Girl Scout in me came out, I'll look for water, you look for fire. And he said back, we are all alone here. And that's when I really got frightened. And there were other creatures that were coming toward me. So I ran, tried to climb up something, and I fell. Then I found myself in another place. And there was a demon, very obviously a demon, who gave me this impossible task of cutting down all these blackberry bushes, that if I could just cut them down, he says, I'll let you out of here. And then he gave me these kindergarten scissors to cut the darn bushes. And every time I cut one, it would grow back. And he says, no, you're going to despair. You're never going to get out of here. And you just go ahead and despair right now. And I just, something in my little Catholic brain said, despair is the worst thing you can do. You cannot despair. You must keep going. So I told him no. Again, I was in another place. I was given this terrible job in an abortion clinic, and that was terrible. And I told him after I did one trip into this terrible room with all these dead babies in it that I wasn't going to do it. And he said, you don't say no down here. And he reached with this big stick thing to hit me. And I just shut my eyes and I found myself in another one. So this went on. And in between, sometimes I would be walking on this dirt road with rocks on it and stuff. And as far as I could see was just devastation or desolation, nothing except this glow, this red glow in the background. And this went on and on. A weird thing was I saw two people in my family that I knew that were alive. So again, there was this confusion about what's going on. I really didn't realize I was dead, especially when I saw them. I saw them separately. It was a weird conversation between us. They wouldn't help me. And when I got back, it became clear that I needed to give both of those people a message. There was something very wrong in their lives. And I needed to tell them because it was going to end badly if they didn't. And so that was a part of it. And then again, there were a lot of similarities to tragedies in my own life that I was able to piece together later. But at the time, it just was awful. So at the very end, and I didn't know it was going to be the end, it seemed like about 2 years if I had to tag it. I was again given a chance to rebel, and I did. And this time it involved a Christmas Carol. And as I recalled later when I got home, it was the name of Jesus was going to be said. And at that, I was all of a sudden in this huge white room and filled with love and joy. And the whole hell thing was erased. I didn't remember that. I knew I was in someplace wonderful and I was afraid to put a name on it. But I looked over and I saw my friend, my dear friend who had just died a month before and of the leukemia. And I was thrilled to see him. I thought, oh my gosh, this can't get any better. He's my best friend. And I thought, oh my goodness, he's dead. And he starts smiling. And I noticed how young he looked and how healthy and how the last time I'd see him, he was dying of leukemia and looked terrible. And I said, he doesn't know he's dead. I wonder if I should tell him, and now he's really laughing. And I thought, well, wait a minute. He seems all right with that. And if he's dead, then The only conclusion is that I'm dead too. And I thought, wow, this is great. I'm in heaven and I'm with him, and let's go see. I want to go see. And he said, now, Mary Kay, you've got too much left to do. And I'd looked over at this wall, this kind of light wall, and there was like a architect's table with this big book, and it was open about halfway. And I glanced at that and I thought, he was telling me something about that book. And I told him, no, I don't want to do that. It's too hard. I want to stay here with you. So that flashed through my mind. And then I was gone. And I had a little interim period where I got to walk down this stream, I guess, to cool myself off, because when I opened my eyes and became conscious back on Earth, I had been in the coma 3 weeks. I weighed 86 pounds. I couldn't move anything except one finger and blink. My parents, my family were around me. I was totally confused. I mean, you're in heaven 1 minute and now you're back here. And they were, yay, hooray, mom's back. And I was furious. I thought, what a lousy trick to, send me back and tell me I've got too much left to do and I can't move. So I was in the ICU for 3 weeks, and then I was in another room by myself for a week. And then they put me into a physical therapy rehab facility for a month so I could learn how to walk and talk and swallow. And I had no muscle mass, so I had nothing to go on. I had to start all over from scratch. And this was very depressing. And then I had, just when I was just about ready to be released, one lung had collapsed, and they almost lost me with that, but they got it reinflated. It was severely damaged, but at least it was working somewhat. And now the other one collapsed. And I was kind of mad at God about that time. I thought, you send me back and then you're going to kill me here. I don't know. It was a terrible, terrible situation. So I finally did get out of there, and it took me a full year to get my health back. And then I was angry because I wanted to be in heaven. I did not want to be here. And so it was tough. And again, not having anybody to talk to about it made it even worse. But eventually, when I started having these synchronicities in my life and other things were happening, I was able to kind of look at people and know what they were feeling, and knowing if they could lie, and they were lying to me about something, and weird things started happening. And I had no, I went to a therapist. She just put PTSD on my chart and says, we got a little work ahead of us here with you. So thank God I found ions, and I went to a couple meetings, and I didn't hear anybody that had bad experiences. So I really felt out of place. And I thought, well, why me? I really wasn't that bad a person. Why do these people all get to go to heaven? And I didn't. So it took reading Howard Storm, who had a near-death experience that was pretty bad, and Nancy Evans Bush, and a couple people like that to think, wait a minute, maybe it wasn't all that bad. Maybe there was a purpose. Maybe there was a reason. And over a period of years, I mean, I've been back 21 years now, and it's taken a lot of time and a lot of prayer to accept what happened was really what I've been told is for the brave people. And we have serious things to bring back to people, and that's my job. So now I spend a lot of time on podcasts and stuff, telling people you don't have to go to hell. I know now that I was born and raised with the expectation that when I died, I would have to go to purgatory and get my sins burned off before I could be pure enough to stand in God's presence. And I bought it, and I wasn't disappointed. I got to go. And I'm just telling people now, give that thought up. We make our own hell, as far as I know. And if you actually know and believe in God's unconditional love for us, he could never condemn anybody. He wouldn't do that. Sorry. This is really tough. Every time it was a bad experience, but I have to tell people, don't go there. You don't have to.
I understand. So there was a lot of information there. Your book has even more information. I recommend it. It's pretty well written. And I thank you for giving me a copy to review. And since we first met on one of the IN support groups, we've gotten to know each other, and we've been doing some things together. So I want the audience to know that we know each other reasonably well at this point, even though you're based up in Seattle and I'm based here in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. Thanks to the wonder of the internet, we've gotten to know each other. So regarding the whole experience, it echoes many of the standard sort of things that near-death experiencers go through, that at first they're not sure what happened. They come back and they don't want to be back. They wonder, why are they back? What's up with that? They feel like they've been rejected. And then it takes a while, sometimes 10 to 20 years, to come to terms with it and to feel like they understand what happened and they can make sense of it. So it sounds like you went through those fairly standard stages,
Yes.
and then you had some of the standard after effects as well, where you felt like you could understand what people were thinking. So in the experience, one of the key things you were saying is that your Catholic upbringing, you feel that had a large impact on things. Do you want to say a little more about that? And how do you feel about Catholicism after all of this?
I always loved my religion. I really did. I was raised that way. My whole family was Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. I got married in the church. I baptized the kids. I believed in all that. And so my experience, the understanding people come back with is pretty much that God is love. Love God above all things, love your neighbor as yourself. All the kindergarten stuff I learned as a Catholic. That's all you need. It's those, be loving and kind. That's all I needed. So I had trouble going back to church. I had trouble saying God sits at the right hand, Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father. And I had to say, wait a minute, there's no thrones up there. A lot of it was metaphors. I could finally understand that because those people that wrote the book, most of them, except for maybe Paul, had never had a near-death experience. All they could understand was what an earthly explanation for Christ being the king, and that meant armies and it meant all this stuff. And none of it was true for me. So when I got back, I couldn't say the prayers. I would go up to the priest after his sermon. I'd say, you're wrong on that. He was telling kids, okay, kids, now don't be mean to your sister. You'll make God cry. I said, you don't tell them that crap. I said, they can't make God cry. You're just alienating. You're teaching those children to be afraid of God, and it's wrong. So there was a little problem there. He started ditching me after church. So eventually I kind of slid away. And I think with COVID, it gave me permission not to go anymore because it was still that little Catholic thing. You got to go to church on Sunday, you're committing a sin thing that I had to get over. So now I'm a spiritual person rather than a religious person. And I think that's rather common. It's not that I put people down for what they're believing. They're where they are in their journey, but I skipped ahead.
Yeah, I think that's an important uh, clarification that you're not against religion per se, but your understanding now is that it's broader and deeper and different than each us, and that as all the near-death experiencers report, even those who've had distressing experiences, they all confirm that God is pure love, and all this stuff about things that aren't love are of our own creation, it seems. So tell us then what you feel with that setup then, what you feel caused you to have the hellish experience.
Well, I think, again, I expected to go there. So when I ended up there, a lot of the things that happened paralleled what I considered hellish experiences in my life to date. That's what I had to work with. And then, of course, all the stories I'd been told about demons and fire and torture and punishment, all that. Just kind of, I made my own hell, and um, I can't undo that. It happened to me, but I just, people need to know you don't need to do that. And I don't know how else to say it
So,
except to say it's horrible, and you may want to work on that.
so you've come to understand then that the negative experience you had was due to beliefs that you had adopted in this world and that you carried over into the death experience. Is
That's
that
my
true?
understanding. We've got these little tiny human brains, and there's once you get on the other side, it's just unfathomable how much is going on over there. And we're really, I believe that we all choose to come down and learn things. And somebody put it really well in a book I read recently. They said, even being in paradise with knowing everything and being totally happy and being part of the whole, and yeah, that might get a little boring. And for me, I get bored easily. So that's, other people may not see it quite that way, but that's the way I look at it. So you say to yourself, or I said to myself, gosh, I want to know how it feels not to be part of everybody. Everybody knows what I'm thinking and doing. I want to go see what it's like to just be me. I want to see what it's like to learn I want to learn how patience works, or how kindness works, or and so I chose my life. And from the sounds of it, we choose several lives. That's a little much for me to handle right now. I'm barely getting through this one. But okay, so I chose to come down, and I wanted to learn about does it feel to lose a child at birth? I had that experience. She lived 2 days, and it was a horrible death. She died. Now, I look back on that, and I had always seen that as, why, God, did you do that to me? Why did you do that to that little innocent child? I was angry with God about that. But on coming back, I now see the times that I was able to help other people, particularly my girlfriends that lost babies after I did. There was an empathy now that I had. That's different from sympathy. Sympathy is, oh, I'm really sorry. And empathy is, I know how you feel, and it sucks, but I made it, and I'm here to do anything I can do to help you. And I'm so sorry this happened to you. So that's how I look at things in my life now that are upsetting or annoying or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, there's a lesson here. I've got to learn something. And so I don't feel like I'm a victim anymore. I don't feel like God's doing things to me. I can sit back and laugh and say, wow, I chose that. What was I thinking? What am I supposed to learn from this? And that alone has completely changed my life. And it's just a good way to go through life now. It's a lot lighter.
Yes, I understand. So um, you've been very kind in not describing the depth of detail, which you go into more in your book about the hellish experiences. Um, but I can confirm for the audience that it really was quite unpleasant, as was the experience shared by Howard Storm in his book. Um, and but you both had a similar experience, which was after some period of torment, you you had the idea, you got the concept, something crept in that for Howard, he said he just noticed that whenever he mentioned the word God, um, that the beings around him would recoil, and then he started to just remember any phrase that had God in it, and like in God we trust, or God is
Yeah.
good, or whatever it might be, and this started to offend these tormentors. And so something similar happened for you. Tell us a little bit about how you woke up to the concept that you could fight back in a sense.
Well, I guess I was still being a brat. I mean, that's the whole misfit in hell thing. I just wouldn't buckle. And so I'd been there, like I say, it felt like a couple of years. And now I was in this group of other women who'd been physically abused. And now we were going to be employed on a full-time basis as prostitutes in hell, which didn't ring my bell. I thought, oh, great. But it was cold where we were that time. Cold as hell is a real thing. And snow everywhere. We were scantily clad in this horrible little cabin that didn't have any insulation. And I turned to this horrible demon lady who was in charge of us. We were waiting for customers. And I says, I've been here a while. I don't know, is it me or is this a particularly nasty day? I feel I feel bad. I feel really worse than I've ever been. And she offhandedly said, well, it's Christmas on earth and it's always the worst day in hell. Well, that was the first time I heard hell. And I thought, I can't get in any worse trouble than I am now. So I just started singing Away in the Manger. It just came into my head. It just popped in. Christmas. That's my favorite song for that. So I started singing, and this woman, she was over in the corner, she said, stop that. And another lady started singing, and then another lady started singing, and she's yelling to shut up. And it came to the part, little Lord, and she screamed and came running at me. And I just put my hands up. And that's when I woke up in heaven. So it's pretty cool, actually, but I didn't think about it before. It was like I always had been taught that God doesn't go where God is not wanted. So God is not in hell. People go to hell to get away from God. And there are people, I guess, that do that. I don't want to go into that. I don't know their thing, but that was, I think, why I couldn't think of God, because I was in hell and God wasn't there uninvited. But once I was going to say his name, I guess that was my get out of jail free card.
Or not so free, given that you
Yeah, it
spent a
was a
while
step
there.
up getting out of there, I'll tell you. Yeah.
So one of the keys seems to be that our your beliefs created some of the experiences, or enabled you to have those experiences because you believed in that reality of being punished, um, and then remembering that you could call on God, or in this case, Jesus, led to the alternate reality manifesting itself.
Yeah. Just go there first. Don't go to the first.
So,
Don't go to hell if you don't have to. It's yeah. That's that's the message. Because I couldn't talk about it for a long time because people didn't want to hear about it. Yeah, every time I did, they'd say, "Gosh, what'd you do to go to hell?" And it's like, read the book. Well, later now, but it was just frustrating. And so, if there are people out there who have had a disturbing near-death experience, and you know how I felt, and I know how you feel, I am empathetic. I suggest strongly that you get yourself to the IANS people. They are our people.
so it feels that it largely centers around feelings of guilt and unworthiness that lead to this type of negative experience. Now, Howard Storm's experience was different than yours. You were religious, although perhaps sporadically practicing at times.
No, no, no,
But
no,
you had
no,
had
no.
some
I was
difficult
always a
experiences.
Catholic. Always a Catholic.
But did you go to church on a regular
Oh
basis?
yeah, man. It
all
was
the
a
time?
sin not to. I went to church every Sunday. I went
Okay.
during Lent. Confession, the whole bit.
So you
That was
did
my
all the
life.
good stuff.
Yeah, I did all the good stuff. I mean, sure, I got divorced a couple of times, but yeah, I wasn't all that bad.
And you shared some other difficult experiences that seemed to give you feelings of guilt and that showed up in your hellish experiences as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's in the book for everybody who's really interested. Okay. We won't
Yeah.
we won't go into the gory
I'm not an
details here.
angel, but I'm not a devil either.
Yeah. Well, none of us is.
No,
It's
none of
part
us
of being
is.
human.
Mm-hmm.
Part of being human, and that's one of the sad parts of the religious teachings that you know um, make us feel worse and feel guilty about the imperfections that we have here. Um, but so in your book, you mention in a section about speaking with um, God. Do you want to say a little bit about that experience,
You talking about the
if you
voice?
recall, or I can read some quotes? Yes.
The voice, yeah. Um, I think everybody can hear the voice. This is a capital V. Um, when I was growing up, I thought it was my guardian angel, or I thought it was my conscience. It's that other voice in your head, usually when you're going to do something you probably shouldn't be doing, that says, think about that. And I was always very aware of that. I've always felt my guardian angel was just right with me all the time. Not always happy with me, but there. But after I came back, this voice became unbidden. In other words, it came at times where I didn't expect it to. And it was a lot louder. It sounded like me, but it wasn't me because I didn't want to do whatever it was suggesting, like go to an IANS meeting. Didn't want to do that. But it kept bullying me into going, and I did. And I wondered about the voice. But the second meeting I went to, the first meeting I went to, I didn't want to go back because I was the only one that was bad. So the next time, Eben Alexander was going to be speaking up in Seattle, and I didn't know him from a hole in the ground, but the voice just kept saying, you have to go to the meeting. You have to go to the meeting. Well, the drive from where I live to Seattle is an hour, and the traffic is hideous. And I was still fragile about things. My world could fall apart so easily, I found out. So I didn't want to go. Well, it kept bugging me to go. Get in the car, grab your keys, go to the bed. And I was arguing the whole way I got up there. I didn't want to be there. I went in and I was hearing over and over again, you've got to meet somebody. There's somebody you have to meet. And I thought, well, I can't make this stuff up. It may be this, okay, I went. So when I walked in, it was this huge room, and the other room had been a little library room. And I guess this Eben person was popular. There was going to be a lot of people. I didn't know who he was, but I got there really early because I was always afraid of being stuck in traffic. So there was, oh golly, 100 and something chairs. So I thought, well, if I'm supposed to meet somebody and this voice is real, I'm going to make it really difficult. So I went in and I sat in the middle on the end, and there was 10 empty chairs in front of me, 10 empty rows, I mean, in back of me, and 15 chairs down on one side of me, the other side I'm on the aisle. I thought, if this person, I'm supposed to meet this person, make it happen, because I'm not going to help. So I wasn't there 10 minutes when out of the corner of my eye, I see this person walking down the end of the aisle, 15 chairs down. And I thought, oops, I'm not going to make eye contact. So I looked down at the program, and I out of my corner of the eye, I see this person go about 4 chairs past my aisle. And then she cocked her head like she's listening to something. And then she backed up. She didn't turn around. She backed up till she got to my row, then turned and walked 15 chairs over and sat down right next to me. And I thought, now that is weird, but I'm not going to talk to her. I'm just not going to talk to her. So she's standing up. She's waving at people. She's obviously been there before. And the place is filling up. She's looking at her brochure. I'm looking at mine. She finally turns over and says, hi. And I said, hi. And she says, you knew? And I says, yes. She says, oh, okay. So Eben came in and blew my mind. If anybody's ever heard him speak, I mean, he was a neurosurgeon. He was an atheist. He had to brain bleed. He was in all this stuff. And I'm going, wow, I thought I had problems. So I was riveted. And so it came to the intermission. And I was so jazzed. I turned to this gal and I says, I was supposed to meet you today. And she turned to me and said, I know. And I said, what? And she says, yeah, I know. She says, don't you hear the voice? And I says, yeah, the voice told me to be. What's the voice? And she says, oh, you'll get used to it. And I says, well, how did you know to come to sit? She says, oh, I was walking by and the voice says, oh, there's a nice lady back there. Go sit next to her. Oh, I need a drink. It was just too weird. And so we became really good friends. And when we'd go to the meetings, we'd sit next to each other. And she had been there, I don't know, 6 years or something. And she had kind of an unusual death. She died of a drug overdose in a I don't know, in New York, in some sort of club. And she said, I don't want to get up there and tell that story. So I said, okay, we won't tell our story. She says, fine, I'm not going to tell my story. So finally, I don't know, she got moved in her mind. She says, you know what? I figured out how we're going to tell our stories. I said, I'm not telling my story. She says, no, I'm going to sit in the very front row and you're going to get up there and you're going to look just at me. Just tell me the story. Don't look at anybody else. I said, why do I have to go first? She says, that's just the way it's got to be. I said, oh, crud. So I got a hold of Kim, and Kim had me up there, and I hate public speaking. And I was up there, spotlight, don't like that at all. And I started in, and I'm looking right at her, right eyeball to eyeball. And I'm a storyteller at heart. So I got into about 5 minutes of staring at her, and I could hear the audience, see the audience kind of paying attention and all that. So I went through the whole hell thing. Oh my God, that was awful to tell all these people. And they were on the edge of their seats, man, at the end. And finally, I said about the singing the Christmas Carol and how I got out and I was in heaven, and everybody started clapping. It was like they had gone with me on this journey, and they were all happy to be in heaven, and that was wonderful. So I got out of there, and she came up, said, "You did a good job," and I said, "You're next." So she did. She got up and told her story a couple of times later, and she's a popular person at IN. She's written a book and always speaks at the seminars. So it was a miracle, just a miracle. You get used to them after a while.
All right, now you're a couple clarifications from what you just described. Kim is Kimberly Clark Sharp, who's the leader of Seattle IANS.
Right.
And I think it's the oldest and one of the largest or most active IANS,
It was the
local
first.
groups.
Yeah, first.
Right. And
Yeah.
the other person who sat next to you, who became your friend, you have to tell us her name unless you're sworn to secrecy.
That's Louisa. Oh, do you know Louisa? Well, she wrote a book. Oh, golly, my mind's not what it used to be. Anyway, she's at Seattle Islands, and she's just absolutely darling. Really cool lady.
Louisa, okay. Well, we'll figure that out. So
yeah, look her up.
so you had the voice that we've all heard of, the still small voice concept, and I personally, I've learned over the years how to distinguish, and okay, that's probably that voice that's telling me to call somebody or to go somewhere or to, and of course we all do what you did, which is, oh no, I don't have the traffic or whatever it is. We come up with excuses and things, but I can say for myself, I've learned to listen to that voice. And so tell us more about, there's a chapter in your book called Inquiring Minds, where you say the voice and I squared off. And I got in the first jab. Do you want to tell that?
You have to remind me. It's a long book.
Do you want me to? So it says it's 95. So for everyone who's listening, her book has a lot of small chapters. So that's
it makes it easier to read, huh?
So it's number 95. And it says, as the voice and I squared off, I got in the first jab. Say, you might have noticed that I've been praying like hell, and you seem to have gone deaf. I'm asking you to humor me here, I continued. What is the purpose of letting my baby die? My soul-wrenching divorces, a rape without recourse, my dearest friend dying a horrible death, and now this hideous physical mess I'm in. Just asking. You remember some of that? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the bottom line, what comes to my mind is when I said, I don't ever want to have this happen again. And you're full of rules. There's 12 commandments. There's this, there's that. Simplify it. Something that I can remember. And how the voice gave me the words, be loving and kind. And that echoed in my head. He was being funny, trying to solidify it in my head. That came for several days. Loving and kind, merciful and forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful. That's burned in my brain. So if I could, every morning when I get up, I've got my little Jesus picture that I like, and I just say, Lord, help me to be these things just one more day. And then I keep that in my forefront. So when I go out in the real world and people are rude or cut me off in traffic, or I get a nasty phone call, whatever it is, I really loving and kind, loving and kind, loving and kind. And that's what I put that on my little book marker here for everybody. If you just do those things, forget about hell, this whole world would be a lot nicer place, for one thing.
Let me read another piece of that. So it says, the voice responded essentially, well, funny you should ask, came a patient reply. You may have heard that I'm known for my mysterious ways. So answering your questions isn't my usual modus operandi, but let me share a few insights since you asked so nicely. The voice continued, I know you've heard the joke about this life only being a test, and that if this had been a real life, you would have been given instructions on where to go and what to do. You keep a copy of that saying, posted above your computer. And you actually do have that saying posted on your computer, right?
I've moved recently and I
It goes
took it
on to
down.
say,
I got my
Okay.
picture of my dad up there now. He passed away in January. But God works in mysterious ways. And that's another fun thing about the voice and becoming personal with God. You can have these conversations. It's not our Father who art in heaven. It's you can talk to God because God's got a sense of humor. If God didn't have a sense of humor, we wouldn't have one. We're made in in God's image. So that's how I relate to God now. I love God. I love everything about him. And he gets a kick out of us, and so we gotta, again, lighten up.
so the voice went on to say, spirits go to Earth as people and to other planets to learn lessons. They choose what they wish to learn and arrange for many of their soulmates to meet up with them along the journey in order to assist each other. They do their best and they return home to be with me. And they can go as often as they like. I've sent many good souls over the millennia to be examples and to share spiritual teachings to make the journey easier. A lot of folks think they just made it harder. Anyway, so you feel now a sense of purpose in helping people to understand what you understand. And are there some final words of wisdom before we go into Q&A here that you would like to leave folks with?
Oh, just those 8 words, words to live by. And if you forget them all, everything else, just remember to be loving and kind. And that thing about
If you would say
finding
that,
your soulmates, wait a minute, the thing about the soulmates, that's a very fun thing. Once you understand that's what you did, you were up and I guess you got your soulmate gang that you hang in heaven with, and you choose to come down with one another. And a lot of times it's a big thing in your life. It's a husband, it's a daughter, or whatever. But there's a lot of people that say, I'll just meet up with you and we'll know each other by this. You'll be in a crowd, or you'll be meeting this person for the first time, or you're sitting next to them on an airplane or something, and they say, don't I know you? I know you from somewhere, and you cannot figure out, it's not possible that you could have met before. That's like the ding that's one of your soulmates, and it's just kind of fun.
So the words are loving and kind, merciful,
and forgiving.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll read it so I don't stumble along. Dear God, help me to be loving, kind, merciful, forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, big one for me, and useful. And useful means putting your money where your mouth is. The example would be, oh, that poor homeless man, he looks so cold. And being useful is just saying hello, good morning. If you got, if he really looks like he's hurting, give him $5, or just go home and take your extra blankets and coats and stuff down to the homeless shelter, or give them money. I really support my Tacoma homeless shelter and the mission over in Tacoma. That's putting your money where your mouth is, when you can actually help somebody. And one last thing there too, on people that I found when I was in the wheelchair for a while, before I could walk again, that I was invisible. And that when I would be in the waiting room or in the halls, people would avert their eyes. And I felt so worthless and invisible. It was awful. And every now and then one person would say, hey, how's it going? And I would just blossom, somebody saw me. So that's a real thing of mine too. People in wheelchairs, or I don't know, elderly, somebody sitting on a bench that looks like they're on their last legs, just good morning, or I don't know, just acknowledge. Those are all us. Everybody is us. We're all one. So when we're kind to one another, we're kind to ourselves.
Yes, yes. It's been said many times, that we are all one, and as it was said once, how you treat the least of these, you've treated me,
Right.
and I think that's the big lesson.
Yeah.
And it's often been said that we are God's hands in this world, and God uses us to help others if we're open to it. And so I do my best to smile at people and to be positive and engaging, and sometimes people will often they'll smile and acknowledge, and occasionally they'll be like, oh, what is this weird person up to? Why are they engaging in a conversation with me? But I consider that their problem.
Yeah.
All right, so folks, we're getting to the question and answer period here. If you want to put anything into the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, either with the raise hand function, which is under reactions at the bottom of your screen, or in a little ellipsis menu with the dot, dot, dot. And we'll take questions, or I'll read anything you put in the chat for Kathy to answer. Jim, did you want to have anything to say?
As you're going through, Kathy, I wrote down a number of questions. First one, if you could just spend a moment, maybe putting a little more into what your expectations were for yourself from your religious upbringing. Did you believe that you were a sinner and that you needed to experience purgatory? Is that your belief system going into this?
Yeah, that's what I was always taught, that maybe Mother Teresa has a straight shot to heaven, but the rest of us are going to have a time out before we go. And I find it interesting that the church lately, I was talking to one of the priests, and he says, well, we're not teaching hell anymore. We're teaching a time out, and there's going to be chairs in a big room, and you're going to go and think about your life. And I said, I can't listen to this. Really? I mean, oh, come on. It's that they keep changing it, because they didn't really, they don't know what's going on. I better zip it.
Well, in some ways, I think that's why people have these near-death experiences. We're trying to change our culture. And if enough people speak up and say that, that's why you're here tonight. Your story will reach people. And I don't know, we may not have anybody in this crowd that has that kind of belief system, but probably a lot that are shaking their heads and saying, yeah, I used to be that way. It comes down to the golden rule, and don't go into your end of life and transition to something else with negative thoughts of yourself. We're all divine, and if we saw that in each other, first of all, we behave differently in this world. We really understood that, and it would set us up for a much more uplifting experience when we move into non-physical realms. You've answered the second question, how's your faith changed? It's interesting that you still interact. Are you still going to Catholic services?
Well, you see, my family's had a lot of problems with this whole thing. My sister was a Catholic, and then she was a born again Christian, and now she's a born again Catholic. It gets confusing. She's an altar girl. And I'm telling you, she likes the part about Jesus, that we agree on. And then there's my mom who says, oh my God, you're not going to church anymore. I mean, that's tough. She's 94. So when I'm see her when I go down to visit the family. Of course, I go to church with them. You know, I like going to communion. I still believe that's a cool thing about communion now. I really believe Jesus was, you know, part of that. And so now when I receive Jesus, I can get very often, I'll get that heaven feeling, just a flash of it. And it's that thing where the joy is so big that it just almost, it feels like somebody hit me in the solar plexus. It's just, and then I start to get these weepy, happy tears. It's just that the human body is not big enough to even take a drop of God, you know, in them. But it's really, I love it when it happens to just be reminded of how huge that love and joy is.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before in these one of these gatherings. One of the near-death researchers, I don't know if you ever met Ken Ring, but he wrote a number of books on near-death experiences. He talks about people like me who have not had a near-death experience, but because I've been exposed to so many, it's a benign virus that we catch. Your love that you experience, your relationship with God, and your understanding of how you're to live your life sets an example for the rest of us to, and it's uplifting when we let that virus into our life. Jackie has her hand raised. You want to go ahead, Jackie?
Thank you, Jim. And thank you so much, MK, for sharing your story tonight.
Thank you.
When you were aware of the fact that you were in hell or someplace very similar to hell, did it occur to you to pray for help?
No, like I say, I really didn't know I was dead. It's so weird because who we are is not our body. Who we are is our soul. So when we get out of our body, it's like getting out of your car. You're not your car. You're just riding in the car. So when I left my body, it was still me. And I didn't think I was dead. So it was just Twilight Zone. It's hard to explain. It's like nothing you've ever experienced before. So you've got nothing to compare it with. I just felt like I was winging it the whole time.
Thank you.
Kathy, there's a question that was put in the chat for me to ask. They would like you to elaborate a little more about your experience with Jesus.
With who?
Jesus?
In hell? I didn't see Jesus in hell. That was Howard Storm.
No, when you were rescued, what was that about then?
Well, that was I just started singing Away in the Manger. No crib for his bed, the little Lord. And I didn't get to say the name Jesus, but it was obvious it was coming up. And that's when, I don't know, the spell was broken. I don't know. At the time, I didn't, not knowing where I was in hell, I didn't know singing a carol would have that consequence. It's another reality. It doesn't make sense with what's here. It's like going to Mars or something.
And so what happened then when that spell was broken?
Then all of a sudden it was like an explosion, and except it didn't hurt. I didn't hear it, but it was just a frame of the picture, everything, the scene changed, and I was filled with this love. I felt like I was, every molecule, I still thought I had a body, was filled with love to bursting. And that's when I saw all the light and joy. It's something that you don't experience on earth. So when you experience there, you don't have a body to mitigate what's happening. You get the whole enchilada, and it's very overwhelming in a good way.
So, Kathy, when you were in this purgatory or hell, were you feeling pain?
I had a great quote that I found from a book of Murello. I put it in my book. He wrote a book about Nazi Germany and some Jews trying to get out. And he also wrote Golfing with God, which is hilarious. And I highly recommend that. He goes to heaven and golfs with God. The whole thing is about them talking back and forth. But anyway, in Once Night Falls, he said there was this person trying to get away, and he was a priest, and the Nazis found out he was helping the Jews get away, and they came and they told him what they were going to do to him. And in the book, he says, "This was the power of evil," he thought before drifting off to sleep. "Nothing need be actually done to you, just the idea of it, the rumor of it, the sense of the possibility of it. That was enough." And that's how I felt. It was always going to happen. And so I was prepared for it. I was already suffering when I was gang raped by AIDS-ridden zombies. That was, I felt it, and I felt terror more than it just, it's not, like I say, it's just not here. It's hard to put into words, but the terror was there. I didn't have a body, but I thought I did. So the beating and all of that, I sensed it. That's the best I can do.
That's good, though. I think it's most near-death experiencers say it's very difficult to explain what it's like. And I think if we understand that there aren't words to really describe it, then maybe we're more open to using our imagination, because we're not trying to rely on specific words. We can empathize with it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Have you met others who have had negative experiences and compared notes with them?
I love Nancy Evans Bush. I was honored to be able to go to her seminar. I always go anywhere she is. And when I was coming out, she was walking by, and she had her cane and she had her purse and she had these books and stuff. And I was just like a little kid. I went up and I said, "Can I carry your books?" And she said, "Oh, that would be nice." And I said, "Would you like some tea?" And she was going down to the bookstore. She said, "Oh, that would be great." So we went slowly down to the bookstore. I got her all set up at her desk, and I went and got tea and came back. And I thought, oh, she's going to be mobbed with people. What a blessing. It was her and me for like 40 minutes. And I got to talk to her and ask her questions. And she says, well, I told her I had one, and she says, well, give me a little background on what happened to you. And then she's the one that started putting ideas in my head. And she says, you need to write it down. You need to write it down, and other people need to hear it, because there aren't a lot of them out there like us. And she was really the one that kind of pushed me over the edge to go ahead and do it. She's marvelous. She's written at least 3 books, and I just kept one on my Kindle, and I just reread it. I don't know how many times I read that book, because she knew, she felt, she understood what I went through and made something positive of it. And it took her a long time to come around to that too.
Yeah, Nancy Evans Bush, for those of you who have an interest in doing some reading. Bill Lenfesty, you got your hand raised. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just trying to understand, because I've not had one of these types of experiences, but I remember, especially when I was a kid, I used to have the same dream over and over, and I would know in advance how it was going to come out. And it's almost like, there were 2 of me. There was one that was involved in this is when it's a bad dream. Didn't ever seem like it happened with good dreams, but with stuff that was kind of scary or that would terrify me. There was part of me that was involved in the dream. And there was part of me that was kind of like a spectator that was standing back and sort of, I knew what was going to happen. Was it at all kind of like that? I mean, because you've had those too. And was it probably more realistic than that, but it was sort of that type of thing?
No, it wasn't a dream. It never, no, it didn't drift in and out. It was just, I was alive. That's all. I just was alive. But what you've got might be those lucid dreams, and there are different dimensions. There's all kinds of stuff that could be. You might want to look into that. That sounds interesting.
No, I think mine are not very prophetic. Usually, if I dream about somebody, it's because I met them that day in the grocery store. Because I took a dream course one time. I don't have the
I mean, the one where you kept dreaming it over and over and over. That might be something to look into.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, the dream environment is an interesting subject by itself, and we won't go into it in much detail. But in all the reading that I've done, it seems that it's more than just the brain randomly producing things. There was a researcher at Duke who found there were women who had prophetic dreams about breast cancer. Before they'd been diagnosed, they'd have a dream which prompted them to go in and get a diagnosis. And in fact, they learned that they had breast cancer. So it's, you have to, it builds an appreciation for the environments, the dimensions that we somehow access through near-death experiences, through dreaming, and certainly when we pass out of this physical existence, we can make a more permanent move back. Let's see, I had another question. Yeah, you were describing the demons, and I found myself wondering, is it possible that these are really souls who have so bought into the negative side of things but may still have some possibility of being turned around? Or do you think that these demons are unlike us and somehow exist on their own and have no hope for salvation?
That's kind of a big question. All I know is that I distinguished them. I understood them to be demons. They were really big and ugly and mean and unhappy creatures. I didn't perceive them to be human souls. It was like they were devils that chose to be in hell. But I really don't know. There's all kinds of theories on that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird because God doesn't send anybody to hell. So there's a lot to think about, and we won't know until we get back home, and then we'll understand. I think it shortcuts our process if we know too much, because we came down here thinking we were human and what we see is reality, but it's not. And it's like a play almost that we're an actor in, and we chose our role. And it's a lot to wrap your mind around. It's taken me years to really believe that, but now there's no going back. I do believe that. It's going to be interesting on other planets. I mean, I'm kind of looking forward to the next time.
Well, we may have already spent time on other planets.
Yeah, I've done those regression things they did on one of our, I don't know, some sort of seminar or something. And I went to some rocky planet, and I was inside this place with moss, and all of a sudden this big spider came up and ate me. And I thought, wow, that was a quick light. And it's funny because my biggest fear in the whole world is spiders. And now I know why. I was eaten by one.
So Jim, we have a question.
Yeah,
we have
a question, and we got a couple of hands raised.
Joanne is next.
Joanne's up at the top there. All right, Joanne, go ahead. You got your hand.
Yes, I don't per se have a question. I've enjoyed listening to you tonight. I kind of wanted just to share a little bit about my experience and a little bit about my views. First of all, I'm a very strong Christian and I go exactly by what the Bible says. And I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but that's just my beliefs. And I measure everything in my life exactly by my Christian views and the Bible. I used to practice as an oncology nurse, so I have a lot of experience in this area. So a lot of my patients had some near-death experiences, and then I was very much involved with helping patients to pass away. A lot of people have not seen that before, and there's just a lot of things that a patient will go through before they die, and families are not, of course, a lot of people want to be at home when they pass away, and the family is just not used to what is happening to the body as they die. And I have observed both people who are going to hell and both people who are going to heaven. And you can tell by their expressions and what's going on. And a lot of times when people are getting ready to die, of course, their breathing changes and they can breathe for a while and then cease breathing for a very long time and then breathe again. Sometimes their breathing can be very raspy. They start to pick in the air. They start picking in the air, start lifting their hands and picking in the air. And they start seeing people who have died before. It's not uncommon whatsoever for them to start calling out their names of their spouses or family that have gone before them. And they even start seeing angels. In the Bible, it talks about angels being guided. They're their guides to heaven. And people have even seen Jesus. But most of the time with the common story you hear in a near-death experience, sometimes people do see themselves as they float up and see, the doctors working on them. I also worked emergency room when I was going to nursing school. And when we have someone that is coded and we're trying to bring them back, either from, a clot that went to their hearts, most of the time a heart attack, sometimes a stroke, but most of the time a heart attack. We have heard patients talk about, when I died, I was up in the corner of the room watching you guys work on me, So hear those stories. And when I was in nursing school, I actually had prayed that God would let me hear someone talk about their near-death experience. And God answered that prayer. And it was a gentleman who had had a heart attack, just like I talked about. And the main thing that stuck with me was he described it as tranquility. Tranquility. I'll never forget that word, tranquility. And he said, I am not a bit afraid to die. Not a bit. I am just not afraid to die. And, the experiences the majority of my patients had, I'm not afraid to die. I've just, helped so many people to die and helped their families to help their loved ones to die. I have no fear of death. Also, as a Christian, I know I'm going to heaven, so I have no fear of death. I believe, and I know this from the Bible, there are two sets of angels. There's, angels that are there to worship God, and then there are angels that Satan took with him when he went to the fall. And definitely those were demons in hell with you. People don't come back in their spirit and haunt the world. Hauntings are definitely not people, they're demons. Even though they can look like the people, it says in the Bible that Satan and his workers of iniquity masquerade as angels of light. So they can even masquerade as good angels, but like I said, this is what I have studied, and I'm saying this out of my experience.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Beautiful thing.
Thank you very
Excuse
much
me?
for that sharing.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to go over. Thank you for letting me share.
Sylvia's next.
Sylvia, you want to pose your question? Then we'll come to Kay. She's got one in the chat room.
Yes. Hi, Kathy. I thank you for your story. And Well, I wanted to ask you, will you describe hell as fog and sometimes spiders and despair and desolation? And I think there is like a description of semantic words that we can describe as ugly. And at some point, these feelings and words, we can see them as being like bad or horrible, and that's why we can kind of connect them with hell. So my question is, after you went to hell and after you went to heaven, do you think your perspective changed about fog, about spiders, about this darkness, even afraid of darkness? Do you think your perspective changed about these notions? And that's it.
What you mean, was I afraid of spiders before I went to hell?
No, I mean,
Yeah. No. I think most of my changes were spiritual. I think they're more interior. It's a less fear because I know I planned it and it's all going to be okay. And if it's different. Yeah, it is different, but I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay,
seems to
Kathy.
me that when you have an experience like this, and it becomes apparent that there's something awaits us, then you can let go of that fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes, okay, if I don't have to carry this fear anymore, how do I choose to live my life? If I don't have that fear, and you understand that we're all going to go somewhere, and then you start focusing on living your life in a way that it's not restricted by fear.
Right.
So, well, Kay's got a question to have posted a while ago. Do you remember feeling fear before you went into the coma state? In other words, as you were having this breathing difficulty, and it was just getting really bad. What kind of? I think this is what Kay's getting at. And Kay, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Were you feeling fear as you went into this coma state?
No, I wasn't. I was relieved to be in the hospital. I was thrilled that my family had flown in from Colorado and California to be with me. I felt like I was going to be okay, and they were just going to, put me asleep for a while, and I was going to wake up and I'd be fine. So no, I didn't have any fear.
The reason I ask that is I just wondered if your state of mind when you went into that coma could have had something to do with your hellish experience. If you were feeling fear, then maybe your
might have triggered it. Yeah, but
yeah.
No, I don't think so. The last thing I remember is my dad was out. They shoot everybody out of the room, and I was in this tent, and they hadn't trached me yet, but my dad stood outside and just put a thumbs up, and I did a thumbs up back. That's the last thing I remember.
I'll share some research. I believe I read this in the Handbook of Near-Death Experiences that was put together by some very well-respected researchers on the subject. There are cultural differences that show that what you believe going into this death state influences what you experience. So if you are Muslim, you will not likely, the likelihood of experiencing Jesus is pretty low. If you're Hindu, you might experience aspects of the Hindu belief system. It's still a near-death experience. You're still going into another realm. My take, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily true, but my take is that what you believe influences what you experience. And therefore, we have a responsibility to try to create a belief system that will maximize our love, our ability to respect one another. What you're going to experience be so much more uplifting if we don't judge others, and we just learn to live by that golden rule. Well, do we have other questions? People feel free to raise your hand or jump in. Kathy, you've participated in some of these before. Here we are. Jill, you've raised your hand. Go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself. Jill?
Yeah.
There you
Okay.
go.
Sorry. I was just wondering, not coming from a Christian background, but being very spiritual in my own way, whether the group that you're in has people from different faiths and what their experiences would be. Because I know that, I don't believe in a man in the sky. And I believe more in universal consciousness. And I don't expect to see a man in the sky.
I think you're right. No, our group has all walks of life, especially we've got quite a few that were atheists that don't believe that anymore. That's the fun thing.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That was my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Bill Lenfester, you got another question, Bill? You have to unmute yourself, Bill.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, two questions. First, when I was studying some stuff on Zen Buddhism, they mentioned a phenomenon called Makyo. And what happened there was the person that was meditating would sort of, I guess it was his mind or whatever you want to call it, was resisting trying to move toward any kind of enlightenment. And so it would give him visions of things maybe that he would enjoy, like, stuff to eat or stuff to do or anything that would distract him. And it would also present things that seemed to be kind of demonic, and just anything to keep him from breaking through to any kind of higher level. And this is not to suggest that that's what you had. I just thought it was kind of interesting that with everything else we've got to fight, it seems like our own natures resist any kind of development. And the second question, or that was more of a comment, but the second question was, now that you've confronted the real fear of going to what was hell for you, are you able to relax with say like any kind of meditative prayer or whatever, so that you can say, if it happens again, I don't have to go through this same thing again, because I've gone beyond it, and I can kind of not sculpture things, but it creates stuff so that I'm going into it with a lot more positive anticipations, and maybe I'm setting the groundwork for having more of a positive experience next time.
Bill, I would love to agree with you, but I'm a human being, and there's about 1% of me that's still afraid it'll happen again. I try, I do everything I can to be positive and believe my own message, and there's just that little bit that keeps me human.
I would be too. Come on.
Anything else, Bill?
No, I just didn't know if maybe some like techniques of things like actual, active meditative prayer or something like that, where you really do use a lot of discipline to kind of go a little deeper. It's not just sitting in the pew on Sunday going through the prayer, because to me it's like going through the motions a lot with me. If there was some stuff that you had started doing that might actually change the way you're feeling about, because I would be scared too. I've got things to be scared of, but I don't know if you had tried anything like that and if it had made any difference.
Yeah, I do more meditation, and in the book I talk about another spiritual practice I was introduced to, and I've started back with that again, and it's wow, so much stronger than it was when I first started. So I'm really enjoying that, and yeah, just staying in touch with God. We just talk, yeah, it's great. It's better than
So-
it was. There's a lot less fear. I have hardly any fear at all anymore.
So Kathy, we have one more question, and I think we might be done. Hillary, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hey, I just, not really a question, just since we're towards the end, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing and for being, what I would say, human about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a more way that's approachable. At least I think, like I like that you, admitted or talked about how, when you came back, you were mad, or it was like, what the hell, are you kidding me right now? I've had an out of body experience, not near death, but, I kind of felt the same way. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, we're part of this universal consciousness and it's so great and loving. And here I am back, back here in the body. And I also like that, you're rebellious and how you were, telling the priest, like, excuse me, what are you doing? So you came back also willing, to confront, the popular opinions, and especially, religion and just, Catholicism, it's harder, for people to stand up against that. So I appreciate you. And like I said, thank you for, being human about it and approachable. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Hillary. That's really nice of you. Very kind of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a note from Jeanette. Jeanette, if you want to unmute yourself, you can pose your question.
Yes, hi. My question is, when you came back from your experience, did you come back maybe with any more metaphysical gifts? Maybe mediumship, maybe you found yourself being more intuitive, or just something that was different out of the ordinary that you realized that was different, before your experience?
Yeah, I'm more intuitive, I guess. I can, I'll be talking to somebody, and if they're telling me one thing and I know it's something else, I don't usually, confront them with that, but I'm a little more kind around them if they're in a mood of some sort. I seem to know more about what's going on. A fun thing is that when I'm watching TV or a movie or something, I can go ahead by about 2 seconds and say what the next lines are going to be a lot of the time, which drives my partner nuts. He's watching with me and I know what's going to happen. And it just quit doing that, So yeah, there's some fun things that happen, but I think it's, knowing more about something weird that happens on airplanes. I do a lot of traveling back and forth to see my family, and I would say probably 7 out of 10 times I will sit next to someone, and they have a feeling about me. It happened in Alaska too. This a couple of days ago. They'll all of a sudden blurt something out to me, like, they'll say, first of all, oh, you coming or going home? I'm going home. They say, I just came from my father's funeral. I don't know what to do. He didn't go to church and blah, blah, blah. And we end up talking the whole 2 hours about what was going on with them. And they get off the phone, off the plane, and they give me a hug. And they say, I don't know what would have happened to me if I hadn't run into you today. That almost every time. And that happens time after time. So there's also an openness, I guess, that I project, that people feel safe And it happened in, like I said, Alaska. We were just buying some stuff, and the lady was being nice, selling us stuff, and all of a sudden she says, my daughter died. Her husband shot her to death, and I just got back, and the other people are standing around going, huh? And they kind of walked off, and I sat and talked to her for 10 or 15 minutes, and she ended up with saying, I found you, and we're light. I'm light and you're light. We fist bumped each other and said, I'm so glad I ran into you. And that was just an ordinary thing that happens to me. I love that part.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for coming on today and speaking with us. It is unique, though, that first time I've heard anybody come back with a different experience. And I am curious about reading Howard with Storm and Nancy.
Storm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Nancy Bush. Yeah, looking forward to that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have Sue has her hand up.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for sharing your story. It was beautiful and a lot of guts to come out and show vulnerability as well. So I appreciate that. I'm really curious, when you moved into the lighted room after you mentioned Jesus or saying the song, did you see a tunnel like most people do? I mean, I did not. I'd never experienced the tunnel in my NDE, but I always found it curious to see who does and who doesn't. Like PMH Atwar did a lot of research on it, and she said it's really interesting that she found most people don't actually see the tunnel. So I'm just really curious, was it just a room filled with light, or did you?
Yeah, it was just like you open up a door and it's a surprise party. It was kind of like that. You had no idea what was on the other side of that door. And that's how it was. I was just in this room.
Yeah.
And it was, no, I never saw a tunnel.
Okay. Thank you.
So here's a little thought on that subject. The breadth of near-death experience is pretty broad. Some are I had a friend who just had a brief out-of-body experience as a result of an electrical accident. So he was just out of his body, saw it on the roof of the building, realized it wasn't his time yet, and he came back in. So not everybody has these transpersonal experiences, and that certainly in that situation, you wouldn't go through a tunnel. So that might help explain why some people experience it. Depends on the depth of the experience you have.
I heard an interesting comment by a near-death experiencer who experienced the blackness, the void, as described by some people, and I believe it was a woman, and she said something to the effect of, thought to herself, I thought there would be like a tunnel or something, and a voice responded to her and said, "Oh, that's for amateurs." So something to that effect. I may have mangled it slightly, but anyway, this has been wonderful. Kathy, we thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been wonderful, and we appreciate the time. Jim, do you want to say anything?
Well, we do have another event coming up. I'm very thankful for Kathy. I know I've got a little talk I've got to give on Sunday, and as I mentioned earlier to you, I'll probably pick some information out of what you've had to say to help augment what I'm going to talk about. I think when we share our stories, we all grow from them. And I talked about that virus concept. So on the 22nd, if you go to our Consciousness-Cafe website, you can read more about that upcoming event. I don't think at this point we have something scheduled for July. It's the summer months, and we haven't put a lot of attention to trying to set something up, but keep an eye peeled because something may still arise. There's some conversations underway. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I mean, you've all made some great contributions, asked some great questions, and Kathy, you can take some pride, I think, or maybe that's not a good word, but understand you've touched some people with with your what you had to say, and we're all helping each other. I think I've said this before in this awakening that's going on. The more we understand that these are legitimate experiences that point to death is not an end, it's just a transition, you start getting rid of this fear. And when you get rid of the fear, then you're free to live more in love. And that's what it's all about.